Dr. Patti Reed.
And is Patti your full name?
P-A-T-T-I, yes.
Okay. And
Or E-E-D?
Correct.
Okay.
and Ms. Reed, have you ever been employed by the DeKalb County Schools?
Yes.
And Dr. Reed, what position did you hold with the DeKalb County Schools?
My last position with the DeKalb County Schools was Director of Human Resources for Employment Services. I served in the position of teacher, assistant principal, and retired as Director of HR.
And what period of time did you serve as the Director of HR?
From about 2005, 2006 to 2012, June 2012, when I retired.
And prior to serving as the Director of Human Resources, did you hold other positions in the DeKalb County Schools?
Yes.
And what positions did you hold?
Teacher, assistant principal, principal, HR coordinator, and then Director of HR.
And who was the superintendent when you retired as the Director of HR?
And Dr. Cheryl Atkinson.
And what were your duties as the Director of HR?
As Director of HR for Employment Services, I was directly responsible for the hiring of all employees classified and certified for the school district.
And what type of employees would that encompass?
Any job that the school district had. I was responsible for the overseeing of the application process, the hiring process, and all the due diligence that went with becoming an employee with the district.
And while you worked, while you served as the Director of HR, did Dr. Walker serve on the school board?
Yes, he did.
And how long have you known Dr. Walker?
I've known Dr. Walker several years. I've been with DeKalb for 31. So at some point I met Dr. Walker several years ago.
During the time that you worked in the HR department, did Dr. Walker ever interfere with your carrying out your duties as the HR director?
No, he did not.
Did Dr. Walker ever demand that you hire a certain person because he knew based on his knowledge of the person?
No, he did not.
During the time that you served as the Director of HR, was there a conflict of interest policy in place in the district?
There was a conflict of interest in terms of applicants who applied for positions and were relatives of board members.
And do you recall what that policy mandated?
Basically, if an applicant was recommended for a position and was a relative of a cabinet or board member at the level of principalship and higher, then we had to get board approval for that relative to be confirmed.
And were there situations that occurred where you all had to get board approval for an applicant?
Of relatives of board members,
Of relatives
yes.
of board members, yes.
Yes.
Do you recall if that happened in regards to Dr. Walker?
No, not to my knowledge, no.
Would a board secretary's relative require a board approval for hiring purposes?
No, it would not.
Now, when you said that you were responsible for hiring applicants, did you or your office review the applicant's resume and their qualifications and skills?
Yes, my administrative staff directly for hiring would do the review for the certifications, if applicable, for any applicant, criteria for non-certificated positions, matching that to the posting requirements that were available when an applicant applied. All of those things were reviewed and secured before an applicant could be confirmed through a recommendation from a principal.
Okay. I want to direct your attention to the exhibit book that's in front of you, to Exhibit 3. and petitioner's exhibits.
Okay.
And if you would just quickly take a look at this document for me. Have you had a chance to read the email that's there before you?
I did.
Now, according to this email, Dr. Walker was recommending a candidate for the TAP program. First of all, would you tell us what the TAP program is?
The TAP program is the Teacher Alternative Preparation Program, and it's basically a certification program for would-be teachers who do not currently hold teacher certification, but do hold degree in required areas. So our TAP program provides a certification path for those people to become certified teachers.
And would you look at the exhibit on page 2 of Exhibit 3? And this document has been redacted to remove the name of the individual, but if you would quickly review that for me and let me know when you're done. And based on your review of the resume that's attached at page 2 of Exhibit 3, would this individual have been a good candidate for the TAP program?
I'm going to check, Your Honor. At this point, there's been no foundation laid as to whether this was the resume that was actually submitted by Dr. Atkinson as part of Dr. Walker's email, or whether it has been updated to reflect current accomplishments. In addition, I don't believe that this witness has testified yet that she actually considered applicants for the TAP program. She's identified what the TAP program is, but I'm not sure if she's actually established a foundation that she would review applications for potential job applicants in the TAP program.
Well, you've articulated a couple of different points. I certainly think she's qualified to comment on whether a person's, with her qualifications, whether a person is a good candidate for TAP. I do think we need to, so that part is overruled, but if you can tie the resume a little bit tighter,
Well,
email.
okay. Well, part of the challenge is that it has been redacted, and there's another witness who is going to testify about specifically about this resume. But at this point, I'm just trying to establish whether someone with the qualifications listed on this resume, if she would have considered them a good candidate.
All right. Well, I'm going to expect you to do that, and we'll let her answer your question.
Okay.
It is, at this point, of limited. I mean, we're splitting some hairs here, but it's a legitimate objection too. So, go ahead and ask that question about this CV.
Okay. So, in reviewing the attached CV, would you find this candidate had the qualifications necessary for the TAP program?
And for the record, you're talking about the second page of the two-page document of Exhibit 3.
That's correct, Your Honor.
It appears that this person has an MA in science, electrical engineering. Anyone who has a degree in science is qualified for a TAP program. Being qualified for the TAP program is not a prerequisite to being hired. You have to be recommended for hire first. And based on your certification, HR would determine if, in fact, you needed to have the TAP certification in order to be eligible to be in the classroom. But a degree person in science is eligible for any state TAP program.
And you said that you have to be recommended for the program. Would you explain what you mean by that?
Not recommended for the program, but recommended for a teacher position. In DeKalb, the first thing you have to do is be recommended to be a teacher. Once you're recommended to be a teacher, and then your credentials are such that you do not have teacher certification, based on the critical needs areas we were looking for in DeKalb, which were math, science, and special education, based on your degree, that would determine for us if, in fact, we are going to offer you this position, but in doing so, you have to get enrolled in a TAP program, either the DeKalb County School District TAP program or any other state teacher preparation TAP program. But you have to be enrolled in the TAP program. Being enrolled in the TAP program was not a prerequisite for hire. So, but in order to be hired, you had to then get enrolled. So the recommendation came first. And with that recommendation came the statement, in order to accept this recommendation, you must be enrolled in a teacher preparation program because you do not hold teacher certification.
Okay. And when you said that you have to be recommended to be a teacher in DeKalb, what do you mean by that?
Our principals make recommendations to HR for new hires. So whether it's a teacher, or it's a secretary, it's a paraprofessional, or departments, department heads make recommendations to HR based on their applicant list, which is an online process. Based on their applicant list, they interview and then make recommendations to HR as to who their recommendation is for the position that is posted. HR then reviews the credentials and either confirms or denies the recommendation.
Did you, based on the email that you reviewed, would you find Dr. Walker recommending the brother of a board secretary for the TAP program to be interference with the personnel operations?
No, it's not interference because, first of all, you don't have to have an approval to hire a secretary's relative. That's number one. Being in the TAP program is an after fact because first you have to get recommended for a position, and if you're recommended for the position, the TAP requirement automatically has to come forth if in fact you accept the position. So this email really is just an email that does not require a yes or no answer response, because if the person is recommended to teach, then HR then ensures that the person is in the TAP program if that's the requirement.
Okay. And during the time that you served as the director of HR, did Dr. Walker ever contact you directly about any issues that he had with personnel?
No, he did not.
Did you ever present reports to the DeKalb County Board of Education?
Only in the absence of our chief of HR.
And did that ever occur?
From time to time, I did fill in for him.
And did you ever make a presentation with Dr. Walker while Dr. Walker was on the board?
Probably.
Do you recall any incidents where Dr. Walker behaved in an inappropriate way when you were before the board?
No, he did not.
Have you ever witnessed Dr. Walker in his capacity as a school board member behave in any unprofessional or unethical way?
No, I have not.
Did you ever speak with the SACS members about the DeKalb County Schools?
I was on one of the subcommittees for review. When the SACS team came, I was on one of those subcommittees where a SACS team member met with the subgroup.
And do you recall when that was?
It was probably fall 2011. I'm guesstimating now. But prior to June 2012, the last time that Sykes was in the schools and did the review with the subcommittees, it was at that time, whenever that was.
And were you on a subcommittee in your capacity as the Director of Human Resources?
Yes, I was the HR representative on that subcommittee.
And did Saks communicate to you or the subcommittee that they were not happy with the DeKalb County policy regarding personnel?
Well, I don't think they said it that bluntly. They basically asked input and questions that we responded to. I don't recall Saks making a blunt statement such as we are not happy with personnel in DeKalb Schools, no.
Did anyone at Saks ever talk to you about perceived nepotism within the DeKalb County School District?
No, they did not.
Did they ever ask you to change your policy regarding nepotism?
No, Saks member did not do that.
Did they ever ask you to change your policy regarding conflicts of interest?
Not me directly. Now, that could have been asked of some other personnel person, the chief perhaps, I don't know, but to speak to me directly, they did not.
How did your subcommittee come into creation?
I was appointed to the committee.
And do you know who you were appointed by?
Probably Ms. March and Dr. Wilson, who was the chief of HR.
How often did your subcommittee meet?
The subcommittee did not meet. Well, we met just as a part of the general preparation for Sykes once, 1 to 2 times, once I think. But basically that was a general meeting saying that we would be pulled together and giving us the process that was going to happen over the next 2 or 3 times when Sykes came to the district. So it's basically an informational meeting to tell what was going to happen over the next 2 or 3 days, and that we were scheduled to meet at said place, said time, and we should come and meet with Sykes at that time. So that was the extent of the meeting of the group.
And what was the purpose of the work of the group?
Well, basically the group was there to answer questions that Saks had. There were several subgroups, and we didn't really know what we were going to be asked. But it was a select appointed group for the purpose of meeting with Saks to address whatever they chose to ask us about.
And based on your years of experience in the DeKalb County school system, do you think Dr. Walker would be able to work on the school board to help ensure it maintains its accreditation and improves its accreditation?
Your Honor, I'm not sure this witness is competent to answer that question.
I think she is. Someone will rule that objection. She's expressing her opinion.
Yes, based on my experience with the school district and my experience in observing and knowing Dr. Walker and his character, I would think he would.
Thank you.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Is it Miss Reed or
Doctor?
Dr. Reed? Russ Willard in the Attorney General's office. Hope you're doing well today.
Thank you.
You spell your name R-E-E-D, correct?
That's correct.
We have members of the media here. I want to clarify, you are not the Pat Reed that was indicted with former Superintendent Lewis.
No, I am not the Pat Reed.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. I thought it might be better to let it lie.
Well, no, we've got members of the media, and I want to make sure that they're aware of that.
It's Patti Reed.
All right.
Thank you for that.
Not a problem. Just a couple of quick questions. We've discussed at length on direct examination, or you've discussed with Petitioner's Counsel, the TAP program and a relative of Ms. Francois who was recommended by Chairman Walker. Was it not your testimony that the normal procedure is that a principal of a school will recommend an educator for inclusion in the TAP program?
They don't recommend them for TAP. They recommend them for the position that's posted.
Right. They recommend them for the position.
Right. TAP is not a position.
Right. It's the certification, the temporary certification program.
Right. So So
But
principals recommend for posted positions.
right, there is a teaching vacancy. The principal recommends an individual to fill that vacancy.
That's correct.
So it would also be your testimony that it would be an unusual occurrence or outside the normal chain of command for the board chairman to recommend a person for a teaching position that would necessitate participation in the TAP program.
Right, but
Is it yes or no question,
As I read the
Dr.
question,
Reed?
he's not recommending for a teaching position. That's not what I read, unless I need to read it again. I didn't see a recommendation for a teaching position.
That responsive to your question, Counsel? If you can, ma'am, answer yes or no, and then you can explain from there.
All right.
Dr. Walker says, this is the individual I referred to the program that I asked you about. With his strong background and personal demeanor, I feel that he would be a great candidate to work with our kids in our schools while filling one of our critical needs areas. That's not a recommendation to you?
Well, to me, it said they referred to the program that I asked you about. Now, is the program the TAP program? Is
Well,
that what we're talking about?
Dr. Walker hasn't testified yet.
Okay. Well,
He
to
does.
me-
The subject line does say candidate for TAP program. As you've explained it, this is a program that is going to fill a posted position. Given that the email came from Dr. Walker, given that he included a resume for this individual, is it not reasonable to conclude that Dr. Walker was recommending this person be hired for a teaching position in DeKalb County, in the DeKalb County school system?
No, I would not say that.
So why would Dr. Walker, as a HR individual, why would Dr. Walker include a resume for an individual, reference the TAP program, if not to recommend him for hiring in an educational position?
I can't really say why he would, but I can say that many applicants send resumes to board members and superintendents as well, and to HR as well. But when I read this, I see this as a recommendation for TAP. I did not get out of this a recommendation for a teacher posted position.
But Dr. Reed, you just testified that you, on direct, and in response to one of my initial questions, you don't become a candidate for TAP unless you have an associated teaching position. So how could Dr. Walker recommend somebody for the TAP program if there was not the corollary of a vacant educational position associated with that?
Well, you can.
How are
It's
you
irrelevant.
consistent in your testimony?
I'm consistent because this email is really irrelevant. It has no bearing on anything really, because if the person is recommended for hire, and when we look at it and see that it's not teacher certification, but the candidate can get alternative certification, that's not something that anybody has to recommend to us. That's something that would automatically happen anyway in order for us to hire the teacher for the position. So you don't have to be recommended for TAP. Once you're recommended for the position and you don't hold the certification, but you have an appropriate degree, then in order to fulfill the recommendation to hire you as a teacher, we will require you to be in the TAP program. And nobody has to say yes or no to that, except the person who's pending to accept the position. And of course, if the position is accepted, then that person has to say, I will enroll.
All right. Well, let's follow up on that. Are you familiar with the grand jury's criticism, the DeKalb County grand jury's criticism of the DeKalb County School Board's Friends and Family Hiring Program, where they hire relatives or acquaintances, family friends, for positions in the system?
I have heard the perception of that,
Okay.
but I don't know exactly what the grand jury says, but I know I'm familiar with that. There's a perception of that.
And are you familiar with the Sachs report that criticizes the Friends and Family Program and the perception of nepotism and the existence of nepotism within the DeKalb County school system?
I have heard that.
All right. Does it not feed into that perception when the school board chair sends an email with an attached resume to the superintendent of schools that clearly implies, put this person in the stack for when you have a teaching position that needs a TAP candidate.
We don't have stacks of candidates that need TAP. I mean, that's not how that works.
This email going to the superintendent seems to imply that if you don't have a stack, you now have a stack of one, does it not?
So where is it? I mean, we don't even know it exists.
Superintendent Atkinson knew it existed. She got it in her inbox.
I'm saying HR doesn't know that there's a stack of anything anywhere waiting. We're looking at applicants and their certifications and their criteria.
Okay,
and
so
their recommendations.
your testimony is if Chairman Walker's email goes to the superintendent and she then calls a principal and says, I know you've got a vacancy, here's the candidate that you're going to recommend for that vacancy, that would exist outside of your knowledge.
Absolutely, we would not be aware of that.
Okay. You've also testified that board approval for relatives of, I think you referred to it as cabinet level,
Members of the cabinet.
members of the cabinet. And who would that include?
The deputy superintendent, the superintendent, and board members.
Board members. And that was only for principal positions or above, correct?
Right.
So theoretically, you could have 50 family members, and as long as they were assistant principal or below, that would never have to have been voted on by the full board.
That's correct.
Okay. Give me a second. We have nothing further this time.
Redirect. Let's take a recess until 3:15 by that clock. We're in recess.